something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Salutations, New Haven. Salutations, Connecticut. Salutations to the world. This is Dr. Turner on the Reed Man Truth to Power Hour. It's New Haven Independent Radio, 103.5 FM, WNHHLP. It's the place where you get an hour of talk and conversation without the interruption of commercials. This idea of community radio is the greatest blessing in the world. We're not trying to sell you anything, not at all. But good morning, everyone. I have a great guest today, and we're going to talk about how kids should be learning, and we're going to learn about from an author, Daneil Howell, who I've come to know over the past probably nearly 2 years at this point. And I think it's going to take us to a place to understand what's happening with our kids in school. When the Attorney General, Surgeon General said that our children are in a psychiatric crisis of anxiety and depression. And, I would say boredom over there. What's happening to them in school? So what can we do? And then the great Spanish celloist, Pablo Casals, who left Spain during the fascist reign of Franco and moved to Puerto Rico and promised never to do a concert to play anywhere. But Pablo Casals, I love the way he looked at children. And he said, a child must know that he or she is a miracle, that since the beginning of the world, that has been until the end of the world, will not be another child like them. And I think Pablo Casals had the secret of what makes a great education for a child. And so we're going to talk to Daneil a little bit about that. And I'm going to ask Daneil to what is this thing you up there? See this background, B economy? I'm not certain. What is that about? What is the B economy and how did it come to be? So I think that's a good opening. Daneil, introduce yourself and tell us about this B economy. Is that the economy?
So, yes, Dr. Turner, you asked me to call you Jesse. We have come to know each other over the last 2 years. Yep. So if it's okay, I will address you as Jesse. Thank you for having me on the show. Yes, my name is Daneil M. Howell, originally from New York City. I'm a manifest creative author, curriculum developer for early child development, fostering meaningful connections between parents and children in a fun, exciting, exuberant way through this concept that came about called the B economy, referencing the economy, but not in commerce for any goods or services, but the commerce of the who. Who are we? They call us humans being who, because our who informs what we do. The B economy is the economy of who we are. You being the best of you, me being the best of me, the B economy.
Perfect. So when we're thinking about this piece, you and I have had some conversations about not only early childhood education, but across the board. And one of the things that, just like now, you just broke into a little bit of song, and all the work that you've done, I've seen it at Elizabeth Green Elementary. I've seen it at CCSU. I've seen this work, and I've seen children in the background come alive and engaged, and it's almost as if it's like ringing the circus. There's 3-ring circus going on. You have them doing all these things, wonderful things. Nobody's stressful. Nobody's bored. Everybody's learning, and we talked a lot about that. And one of the things that conversations you and I have had is that when children are feeling anxiety, boredom, stress, there's 3 natural treatments, therapies that we have, and that is music, art, and movement. When I watch you in action, I see those three things on display all over the place. So could you share a little bit about, because that to me, we talk a lot about social emotional learning. We have spent billions of dollars on social emotional learning. And I think I'm hearing you say it's free. We can do it.
It's right. So I love that you frame it that way, Jesse. I focus on the three S's: sight, sound, song. I pulled that from a colleague of yours, and I know that that's something that emphasizes how we learn for it to be impactful. Yes, the creation of the B economy and these concepts of who we are draped in exuberant characters, colorful scenes, plotted in these games and activities that make learning fun. To borrow a phrase from a former person on the radio that I was with, taking learning out of the seat and bringing it out on our feet, making the idea of learning less of about engagement and more about about education and more about engagement. So we get them out of the seat, away from the desk, and we create these activities, these events that support what it means to live into the growth mindset framework of the economy, which are the 6 C's. And I use these C's to support how it is we build community. What are the C's, you ask? The C's are communicate, cooperate, connect to collaborate, compassion, curiosity. That's the economy, right? So communication, cooperation, collaboration, connection, compassion, and curiosity. That's how we build the mindset of community. And I take those pillars, those principles, and I create games around what it means to understand how communication happens. What does collaboration look like once we've cooperated with an instruction? How do we build on our connections? And what does it mean to build a connection, but also fulfill it and keep or sustain that connection? And we have to do all these things with a sense of compassion. How do we understand what it means to be compassionate, to understand kindness, to understand being careful and mindful for how you encounter people? But it all starts with a willingness to be curious. To be curious, right, Jesse? And that's really what it all comes down to. These 6 C's: building community, building on the B economy, you being the best of you, me being the best of me, the ecosystem of who we are, and allowing the vibrancy of color, interesting characters, and the use of sight, sound, and song to motivate, to excite, to engage, and make learning something that is comprehensive because it's fun.
So it seems to me there's one of the figures in student-centered learnings. In 18, I could be 92.
For some reason, I lost your audio.
I'm not.
Oh, I hear you now. I hear you now.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so we just lost that for a minute. So sorry. I wanted to say that thinking comes along with John Dewey, great progressive educator, who over 100 years ago, at this point, nearly 130 years ago, said that our children come to school ready to learn. They have 4 native impulses. One is they have an impulse to communicate. They have an impulse to build. They have to construct over there. They hypothesize. They question over there. And then he said they have the unique ability to look at all those 3 things and reflect and refine what they do. So these things, so I see that stuff in this component. And I've also saw that when we have discussions, we've talked about alphabet safaris, all kinds of things that we can do. So it reminds me of when I used to teach in Jamaica, and one of the presidents of Michael College is a graduate of Central Connecticut State University. He earned his doctorate here. And he used to say, because teachers in Jamaica, they'd come here in the summer, see my literacy center, see wonderful books, see all this wonderful stuff. And then one day they said, but we need the books for the, well, you know, he's got all the phonics, he's got all the fluency, he's got all this material there. And so Ashburn, Dr. Ashburn was his name. He took him outside. He said, do you see this? And it was the coconut tree. He said, what's it growing? Coconut. That's a C. That's a cur. See what this is? This is a tree. This is a T. That's a tur. He said, everything that's in those books surrounds you. So when we're thinking about that, I'm thinking about, why is it that what you're talking about, it's a mindful approach, and why is it so effective today in a world where maybe we're trying to standardize children who just can't be standardized? Go ahead. All right, we're encountering some difficulty over there. So, audience, I'm encountering some.
My apologies. My apologies. I can't exactly speak to a why, Jesse. I can only speak to the experiences that I have in my engagements. For example, at Elizabeth Green, you invited me to Newington for one of the book fairs and a celebration of your lifelong service to literacy. You gave me the opportunity to present the economy with the permission of Elizabeth Green and create an engagement that would support how it is these young people could learn about the principles of the economy, the C's. And in doing so, it culminates in a final game where they learn about what a hexagon is, where they learn about the word vertice, which are just two lines that become a point, where they learn about how the hexagon itself, as a honeycomb, is constructed with the 6 sides that they collect from one game to the next. So I think just embedding an environment and creating a condition that allows young people to understand that they are engaged in activities that will support their learning, where you're not directly telling them, we're going to learn this today, we're going to focus on this right now. The conditions, the environment, the climate of learning, as your example in Jamaica, the surroundings are already there. You just have to support what that condition represents for their learning and enhance the areas of specific aspects of that learning to keep them engaged, excited, and allow those things to be comprehensive. The economy is based in that concept where I use these characters, I use these concepts that allow the young people to forget about this idea that we're about to specifically focus on literacy or mathematics, arithmetic, subtraction, or any other specific curriculum. And we just create environments that support how they learn about, for example, the ways in which we break down what the C's are, or communication. For your example of the alphabet safari, connecting first to what your favorite animal is. Every child loves to speak about, 1, something that they love, 2, animals. Once we've identified what these animals are, and we talk about where we are in the safari, start to set the framework of the conditions, and then we ask them, well, which animals are on the ground? Which animals are in the air? Which ones do we find in the water or the river versus a sea? Continue to just build on those elements, engaging them in all these aspects of of that environment specific to this animal, and each area of it supports how it is that you can enhance their development by ocean, uh, sky, grass, the animals of the field, the animals of the air, the animals of the sea. Right? It's so organic in how you continue to support that development because of the conditions, the environment, the setting you are laying. And that's what the Beconomy is really rooted in, creating environments, conditions, and settings that make learning very accessible, vibrant, fun, and impactful for comprehension, using the 6 C's and the 3 S's: sight, sound, and song.
Sight, sound, and song. The very things that children come together. There's this poem, I can't remember the author right now, but he talks about there was a time when everyone can sing and dance, speak, and there were shining stars. And we know that. That's like every 5-year-old. We're amazed with little kids. We're amazed that they sing, they dance, and somewhere around the 3rd grade, all of a sudden, if I paint my teepee, now I'm trying to remember the poem. It's about a purple teepee. And the teacher says, it can't be purple, and why can't your teepee be purple? That kind of concept over there. Somewhere around the 3rd grade, we say 2 + 2 has to be 4, and you have to answer it quick. In that sense, you can't just say, well, let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, teacher. That takes too long in our school. We want you to do 2 + 2 is 4. That's and it reminds me of Maslow, the humanist psychologist, who talks about higher learning, and he says you have to have love, shelter, and food. Once you have those things, the higher learning comes from this cognitive, not cognitive. I want to say the affective domain. So there's 2 domains in learning. The cognitive is what you learn. And we focus a lot about that in schools today. Maybe I would say for the past 40 years, we have used the cognitive domain, what we learn, to almost crush learning, because we have made facts more important than those C's, than the sight, the song, all of these things over there. So the affective domain is that emotional piece. And that's that piece that, and there's a thing in education called hot cognition. Hot cognition is what you remember. If I can tie it to an emotional piece, the learning stays with you. Now, that also stays with you in 2 ways, Daniel. It could be a bad experience. So if my teacher's yelling at me, screaming at me, there's always tension. You're not good enough. No, you should be able to say, but when I say 2 + 2, you should say 4. Don't be giving me this and this and that. That is stressful to kids. They will remember that, and it will impact their learning for the rest of their life. It's hard for me to explain when what I've seen, the magic that you put together, because kids are floating parachutes up and down. Kids are making puzzles. Kids are drawing things. It seems to me they're moving from these different stations, and it reminds me of good education has stations where kids come, engage, and invite, and they have to collaborate. They do all of these things, and I see an activity, and I remember when we were at Elizabeth Green, we had lots of people there. We had another author there. We had my teachers were there doing all that. But Daniel, they kept attracting to you over there at that piece. So the affective domain, what I want you to talk about how movement, music are embedded in what you're doing.
Yes, I love that, the affective domain, music, movement, and just right. So excitement. I like to. I resonate with the idea that learning is very systematic. It's very formulaic, and at times it's an imposition. And I get that it needs to be systematic because we have to replicate. And I get that there's a formula that relates to the outcomes we're hoping for. So I get all of that. However, the environment that those conditions can be based in does not have to be the static seat, desk, classroom with one instructor. Learning should be dynamic because the human experience is dynamic. That child is not the same child that they were yesterday. And when you have a collection of 30, 20, and in the best case scenarios, 18, in schools that have the funding to allow for smaller class sizes, you need to create the environment for the dynamic nature of a child to come to life and allow them to navigate, to problem solve. That's what I look to build in settings and conditions. So my mindset is always the stations for engagement. And if they can move from one station to the next with objectives and the excitement of achieving one goal at a time, it's not hard to get to the finish line. One goal at a time for the finish line. That's what we say in the Beconomy. And to your example of understanding that number 2 + 2, I created a game called Flip It, where I put 12 domino tiles face down on the table. I line the kids up right and left. We come up with a B name for each team. So Wednesday's teams were Be Learners and Be Great. So Be Learners and Be Great versus each other, right and left. You got 24 tiles total, 12 on each side, 12 kids. They move up to one station. Select your tile. They slide it into place. I go flip it. Now, once they flip it, they have to calculate their individual domino and then do a summation of the two before the next one does to get the domino for their team. If I could send you the video of the scaffolded learning session, second, first, and kindergartners going at it, it was amazing, Jesse, right? And they were so engaged with this process. We did 3 rounds, and at times you had to reset. At times the excitement was too much, the anticipation was too much, but they stayed engaged. Did they learn something that day? I can't say absolutely, but it's an experience that they will not forget. And the continuity of that learning would just be to replicate it each time. If not in the setting of the table, on a sheet that reminds or schema activates what they experienced until we can get back to the table, right? We can't expect classes to suddenly, have the space for us to all, be able to create playrooms. As we discussed, it'd be great to have economy breakout rooms where kids can come for a portion of the day, work through 10 stations and kind of get in built up to go back into learning or cool down because they're frustrated about something and get recentered. But yes, to your point of creating the conditions that support this learning, we have to keep them engaged, excited. We have to keep them in situations where we enhance their learning because they're exploring. And I didn't realize what those were 4 E's, right? But yes, that's what the Beconomy is all about. And in many ways, Jesse, I'm looking to bridge this framework into a digital setting that makes it accessible so that I don't have to be there every time, and that this begins to take on a life of its own, and the growth mindset framework of being the best version of yourself, because we're building mindsets of community through principles of the C's. That's the objective. That's the end goal, and what we are building with the Beconomy.
And so I'm hearing from you, and I know we've had lots of conversations about this, that the audience doesn't realize we've spent hours and hours discussing literacy connections, SEL connections, differentiation instruction connections, universal design for learning connections. We've done that. So what I hear you saying is there's a lot of science behind what you're doing over there. And I'm going to say that there's something else. So I'm ending my 26 years at Central, 45 years in education. But what I've known since I've been a teacher educator, and that's been for 35 years, is that my teachers often will respond that I'll ask them, well, what did I really teach you? And usually they say, you taught us that you can be silly, you can have fun, that kids can laugh a little and still learn, that kind of concept over there. And it's always been that idea that I've understand the hot cognition. If I can show you that learning can be meaningful. So we've got that connection. You mix the cognitive and the affective domain, and you make things interesting and fun. So now I don't know what's the story about this approach, the impact of the bee economy. Where did this come from? Did you just go to Starbucks and order a cappuccino and it said, I don't have one. Here's a bee economy.
That's cute. That's cute. Well, thank you for bringing us back full circle, because I didn't fully answer where the economy, the impetus of it. In a moment of failure, Jesse, I have to be completely transparent and authentic here. I wasn't the best version of dadding in the midst of COVID. Society had done a disservice to my gender role, telling me that I was supposed to be a provider, that I was supposed to be a disciplinarian, that I was supposed to have a very specific skill set as a parent, primarily the father. There wasn't an idea of mutual parenting. So thrust into COVID and in the throes of raising 3 boys, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 5-year-old, all shut in because of this crisis of society, I was failing. And in the lowest point of that was the bedtime process, just trying to get the end of the day over with, Jesse. In this idea that when they get in bed, I get an opportunity to have something for me. It's my time now. And, not managing what I understood to be my reality in COVID as primary, asynchronous learning in pre-K4 and kindergarten, I was losing it. And it was one terrible bedtime that I slammed the door after telling the boys the night was over and they needed to go to sleep. And on one side of the door, they're crying. And on the other side of the door, I'm standing there prideful, broken up, and saddened by what that was or what that is. And the last thing I say is, "Good night." And as the crying continues, I didn't have the mental, wherewithal to go back in and reset. I was in my pride at the time. I didn't have the emotional maturity to collect and gather where I was failing and sit with my boys and let them know that what they just experienced wasn't okay. And aware of all of this, acutely aware of it, I'm in the mirror telling myself that I'm getting up, that I'm not doing well, that they don't deserve that none of this is their fault. And it's in that self-introspection and accountability. I go online and I'm looking up information. I'm like, what's out there? What are people doing? I need help. I need support. I stumble onto a journal written, commissioned by healthychildren.org, commissioned by the American Academy of Pediatrics. And it was called Food Fights, The Four Bs, written by Laura Jana and her colleague at the time. I can't recall her name, but Dr. Laura Jana is a world-renowned pediatrician. And the four Bs related to women preparing their toddler, believe the age was 2, with the bedtime process that supports establishing the mindset of a toddler, understanding the things they need to do to create the conditions and environment to lay the child down and get them to go to sleep. So as I'm looking at these bees, I'm like, well, I don't do anything with bottles, and things of that sort, but the other ones apply. Bath. I don't do bottles, but we do brush our teeth. We read a book and we go to bed. And I was like, hold up, the four Bs. Why am I just learning about this? Why am I just hearing this phrase? I've been a dad for 5 years at this point, and I'm just hearing the phrase, the four Bs. So randomly one day, I say to the boys, all right, guys, let's get our Bs started. And they're looking at me confused. I said, our Bs. Before we go to bed, what do we do? That starts with the letter B. And we then become the exploration group, where we're going into the bathroom and we're looking for all the Bs. And my brain is like, wow, look at them. They're like, oh, Daddy, the bathtub. I'm like, the bathtub starts with B. I said, what do we put into the tub? It's shiny and it floats. Bubbles, bubbles, bubbles. I said, that's a bee too. And then what do we do? So it became this engagement. It became this activity that supported how it goes from this arduous battle of the individual things we do to get them into bed so that we can say good night, to the concept of one framework, the four Bs, that support each element in a phase. So my mind is, get through the four Bs so we can create the good night, and you can be the good in your good night. It became our process, our routine. It worked amazingly. It shifted who I was. It shifted who they were. We had this amazing experience. And I said to myself, there is no way that I can go from what that was, right, juxtaposed to what I was failing as, to this new dynamic and not do something with this. That was the impetus for to writing the children's book, The Four Bs Before Goodnight. I used the play on the word to be and the insect of bees to create some separation from what I knew Dr. Laura Jana had coined. The word, the number 4, and then the letter B. I chose to flip that and talk about the 4 Bs, which were characters who were in a hive teaching about the bees they do, to kind of give it a new life, right? So that's why I titled the book The 4 Bs. It's about the characters who do the bees before good night. The 4 Bs before good night, a play on the phrase. The word before is the phrase, the word be, the number 4, and good night. And it became the reoccurring theme for my stories. So before good night are the 4 Bs, the things you can do to help be the good in the good night. Before we make friends are the 4 principles. Before we make friends, this we should know. Being kind helps friendship grow. Sharing, no hitting. Last, don't think twice. To be a good friend, simply be nice. No hitting, be nice. And that became the framework for my concept of books that would follow before we travel. Before we travel on any trips, Mom made a list of helpful tips to ensure our trip is a fun affair. She wrote a list just for our care. Be patient, be fair, be kind, be aware. These are the things they want us to know before we travel, before we go. So it just became this process of what does it mean to create frameworks that support development, that support transition, that support the S's, sight, sound, song, that support engagement, that create the growth mindset in a fun, exuberant, exciting way. And from that, I saw the reoccurring concept of this B4 theory or theme. And I said, wow, before this, before that, learning made sticky like honey splat. I got to create a world where these bees are bringing all of this to life. And that's where the bee economy came to be. So a long version of the story, but that's the story.
And then we've got it so we know the future books will be before school, like you said, before travel, before play, before we play baseball or run on sport team, before ballet, all of these things. And when when I'm listening to the story here, and I think we can help our audience know a little bit about you personally and stuff. And I hope that's okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So you were a compassionate father. So when you say I was failing, I don't see failing. It's one of the things I think we make a mistake in school. We tell kids, you got to get it right. You can't fail. And I'm thinking, no. What we should be telling them is we learn from our mistakes. We grow from our mistakes. And we can only do that when we're compassionate about something. So you were.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you.
Father. Yes. And that concept over there. And I think, so you have 3 sons. I think 2 of them are adopted. One of them, you thought you were giving up on life, you and your wife, not life, but, and all of a sudden, God said, and I'm saying God, because you're also a man of faith,
Yes, sir, I am.
I've eaten with you out. I think we were at Pepe's Pizza, and I'm with Barry Lane, another person who's been on the show. And I remember, and we're jumping into our salad, okay, before the pizza. And I see that I was ahead. And I knew exactly he's over here saying grace. And really what I asked myself was, why did I not join him in grace? So I'm a person of faith. So tell us a little bit about, because I think to be a good father, you have to care enough. You have to ache to care enough to be a better father. So tell us a little bit about, your personal story.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Jesse. Yes. So I am a father of 3, a husband of 14 years. My wife and I are very transparent about our story. We were infertility treatments for about 10 years, and we had 6 failed pregnancies, and had kind of, given up on this idea that parenting was going to be for us. But we were just out of order, right? There's the order that God puts in place if you are seeking the will of God, that He will let you know, or that they will let you know of, if you are asking for guidance. And I don't think we were doing that at the time. I think at the time we wanted what we wanted, and it wasn't the timing. So with all that being said, we had given up on what it meant to continue to try, because in true transparency, after 6 failed pregnancies, one having been a 3-month failure where my wife had to pass that pregnancy on its own, because it wasn't like the others where it passed on naturally. She needed support in that one passing, and even to add more to that dynamic of the unfortunate nature of it, my wife is a priest, and she was baptizing children during the Easter season, and we had become people that I didn't recognize. We had become versions of ourselves that were broken, and in a place of hurt. It was really difficult at that time, and I was like, "Look, why are we doing this to ourselves? What are we doing?" And I did not want to meet those people again. Um, and so, that was my perspective. But I alluded to the fact that my wife is a priest. And if you understand anything about the faith dynamic or the hierarchy, she is the mother of a church. So she says to me one day, I am a mother of many and a mother to none. I want to be a mom. I'm like, I didn't know how to react to such a statement, but it hit me in its true nature of, you know, someone's soul needing to be a part of what it means to be a mother when you juxtapose that to having to spiritually mother so many and have none to yourself. Um, I didn't want to stand in the way of that, but I also knew what we had gone through and in the losses. And I didn't want to experience or encounter those people again. And I didn't think that I was prepared for it. I didn't think we could manage our way through it without losing each other. But for God, right? So when I say having faith and understanding what it means to lean on your faith and put that faith into action and ask for direction. It was a moment where I needed God to lead God and direct me for what was being asked. And as a result of that,
But we're hearing that God always has a plan. That's what my mother had thrown the little chat box when there was a time when I was a homeless kid. And for about 2 years of our lives, we struggled just to be able to have a bed every night. And she used to always tell me, God has a plan. You may not know it. So you came to this piece, and I think your story is this motherhood started beginning doing adoption and some this stuff about fertility hits home because we only have one child, and my wife had a series of miscarriages, and the one child we had, the doctor told her one week, this child is not going to make it. Go home and you will have a miscarriage, but there'll be others, he said at the time, because we were newly married. And I remember I was used to have a janitorial service, and I'm going to say there's a transformative moment. I'm cleaning an Episcopalian church in Hoboken, New Jersey, and it's midnight, and my wife just left my wife in tears, and I'm trying to teach, and I'm trying to make some money so we can do things. And I remember just falling on my knees after I cleaned this beautiful church that also had a beautiful school, beautiful Montessori school at there. And I've just finished cleaning all that. And my wife sometimes used to help me out, but not during this time. And I remember just falling to my knees and saying, God, just this one, and not for me, for her. So faith has a component about it. But also, now we got that. When I'm looking at this book, you tell me there's some little sign in the book over here. So there's more to your story. It's not only that you and your wife are a couple of faith. You also, you're outside the box. And people say to me, you don't become PhDs when you're homeless. I don't understand this stuff. I don't. So tell us a little bit about your own childhood, because this is what's going to make the people say, be economy. We want to know, where's that compassion come from? And I'm sorry to get so personal and stuff, but I know there's a deep well of strength and faith that makes things happen. So a little bit, tell us about your when you grew up. Your wife and you are a traditional family. Like, my wife and me and our daughter, we're very traditional. I'm over there. We go to church on Sunday. We bow our heads, all of that stuff. But that was not my life. What was your life like as a child?
So thank you for that pause, Jesse. I appreciate that. I was caught up in the emotions of recognizing what you know, how this all originated, and what it means to to seek God in direction, despite you whether or not you feel you're deserving. Um, uh, we are all broken and fragmented peoples in a process of recognizing or realizing the work that God wants to present us as. And as actively participating in that process, my process is to seek guidance despite failures, despite successes, despite whatever the dynamic may be. So just to recap and finish up what I was saying, and you gave me that pause, and I will get to your question directly. I became a dad of three under three in a year, having continued to seek God's will and direction. We decided to attend DCF classes. We decided to adopt a sibling group. We decided to become parents, and we were gifted with Dominic, Darius, and the miracle that was Dorian, who would follow 2 months later after our adoption had finalized, the day after my birthday, actually, 11/28. My birthday is the 27th. We were gifted Dorian with the news of his pregnancy, of his him being, my wife being pregnant with him that January. So I would become a dad of three under three in a year quickly, and we were ready-made family. Add water, stir some eggs, turn on the oven, and here we were baked. No real gestation process. Get up and go. So it was a lot of figuring things out. Excuse me. And that's a credit to God. Present day, we're all doing amazingly. They continue to inform what it is that I do. They are, they're my guinea pigs on everything. And, they get all the credit for what this has become. Background on me, I'm from Brooklyn, New York City, raised by Pamela and Vincent Howell. And we were a conventional family for about 8 years. Then they divorced. I was too young to remember, any dynamics related to why that was. I realized at the time, I realized a couple years later that my mom was actually a lesbian, and she had come out to me one evening, laying in bed together watching A Different World, one of the Cosby spinoffs, and of the Bill Cosby spinoffs, and there was an imagery that supported why she would tell me that. And obviously, in context, I don't really know what she's talking about. But when she says it to me, and she tells me this story later, she says, "My heart broke when all you said to me was, 'Mommy, are you happy?'" And I recall that. And, it's so amazing how children can just be the most authentic thing you need. It honestly, just arbiters of God's truth at that time for what you need. And I think I represented that for her. So to bring that full circle, it was important for me to reflect in my creation a world that I understood to be inequitable, a world that I understood to be intolerable, a world that I understood to be a reflection of things that represented the uniqueness of the human dynamic. And although they are all bees, or we are all humans, which is what we share in common, we are different. So though we share in common that we're human, like bees of a hive, they are all bees. I wanted these characters to have dynamic nature. I wanted them to have personality. I wanted them to have anthropomorphic nature so that they could speak about real life concepts in the context of a hive or a global Earth, but also be themselves, be uniquely a version of what we see in everyday society. So my book was created to reflect a conventional family, mom and dad, an unconventional or not so conventional family, mom and mom, and pop and pop. So I do pop and papa, I do mom and mama. And that's the economy. That's the dynamic nature. That is the human dynamic. And I don't, that's not me trying to leverage any specific thing. That's my reality. I grew up with two women in the house who helped my bedtime process, who helped me with homework, who helped me get ready for the next day of school and get me out the door before we go. As you just referenced that I should work on the next book for the next morning before we go. Before we go, these things we must do. Daddy knows 4. Can you tell me 2? That's a quick little rhyme for you. So I'm going to work on that book, Jesse.
And I will write the full word for you. So
yes, that'd be awesome. Yes, sir.
Professor will write the foreword in that one.
Amen.
You have a foreword in that one. And as I'm looking at this, because someone said to me once, my teachers, because I've worked with teachers now for the past 35 years, teachers, families, and children. I'm a unique kind of professor. I work in a real world setting with families and kids. But one of my teachers said, there are so many broken kids in my class, and I don't know what to do. Who do I save? And you get to the point, you say, save the one next to you. Save that one. But no. And others said, yeah, well, I said, they're all broken. They're all broken. You need to save them all. And if you save them all, you'll save yourself. That kind of concept. This is that idea. And that's what I'm hearing. And I wanted the public, because often we'll sell the author. One of the great adolescence authors is a guy named Avi. He wrote a lot of books in the 80s and the 90s, great stories and stuff. And Avi, when you meet him, his books are dramatic and they're powerful and they deal with the justice. But when you meet him, he's the most introverted person. And I remember with Avi, I said, maybe we should, when you're at the conference, maybe somebody else should talk about for you. And, but this concept, and you don't have that problem with being introverted, and that probably when we think about that, it's when we have powerful mothers, powerful role models. So I'm the only male child in a family of 4. I'm the one that really grew up as our father left us when I was 10 years old, abandoned us, didn't even give us a note, all that stuff. And that's all the stuff but my mother was a rock, and I learned from that rock, and I learned that all that stuff. But I think that's good. But now I want to know, because time will start running out. What's going on in West Hartford next week? What is it next week or what's going on? What's all this talk about Juneteenth? What's happening? What are you doing?
So thank you for that as well, Jesse. And yes, we're all broken, and we are fragments that are being put together. And my hope is that people can recognize that you can be an active participant in the creation of self. So be a little more acutely aware of being the better version of yourself. So yes, the bee economy is just growing, right? Opportunities right now. I run a youth program in Waterbury where I teach the 6 C's. We focus on literacy and people just learning about what it is that I do. I pitched a concept of again the B4 theme related to Juneteenth's encounter on the day of celebration. I recognized that there was an opportunity to expand an encounter to be more of an engagement. So I pitched this idea of a 2-week-long scavenger hunt that based on 3 pillars of engagement, the community learns about the impact of individuals of color or indigenous root, and through 3 pillars: social community engagement, impact, social community impact, um, uh, economic impact, and historic impact. And we take all these things, all these figures, all these historic moments, and we highlight them in this scavenger hunt. And each day, I release a clue that the participants go out to engage and discover this information. And as a result of that, they receive a stamp that gives them a letter, and that letter will ultimately solve the mission, which is a word phrase. That word phrase will be discovered on the day of the celebration, and all together we will hopefully enjoy the excitement of the realization of the phrase. And so that event is called Before We Forget, a Juneteenth Scavenger Hunt. Before we forget. And the objective, again, is to highlight impact of individuals of color or indigenous root, and to based on 3 pillars: economic impact, social community impact, and historic impact. So yeah, that's one of the things coming from the Beconomy. You can look that up on beconomybuzz.com/Juneteenth, beconomybuzz.com/Juneteenth. And it launches, and there's a countdown. It launches in about 9 days. And you can register to be engaged with it just online if you want. I'm going to put clues through a QR code online. Or you can, if you find yourself in town, scan the code and explore around.
So we're going to hold you right there, because what the audience needs to know is how to get in contact with you, because we're down to like our last minute. How do I get in contact with you?
Well, right now, the best way, I'm going through a rebrand. So the best way to get in contact with me is by phone directly, 347-456-8884. That's my cell phone. Or through email. The company that owns the Beconomy is Concrete Friends Productions. So you can email me at cfpro, C as in Charlie, F as in Frank, P as in Paul, R as in Robert, O as in Oscar, .Daniel@gmail.com. Or you can find me at the www.thebeconomy.com. And you can obviously purchase the books at Before Goodnight, the title, beforegoodnight.com. The word, the insect word B, so it's BEE for goodnight.com.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. It's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to writing the foreword for your next book.
Appreciate you, Jesse. Thank you so much. For all the listeners, thank you guys. Have a great, amazing rest of the day. You being the best of you, me being the best of me, the Beconomy.
Telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.